Um, there's 3 stickers here, holographic stickers, and just feel free to take them. Come down, anyone wants any? Where's my GNU? Yeah, where's your GNU? Okay, so Mario, who's the organizer of this conference, he said, we want to bring back the, cypherpunk, early crypto-anarchist ideals of Bitcoin, and I'm making a very small conference. It's not a big conference, but I want you to talk about Bitcoin's early history. So that's why I'm here. To begin, who here was involved in Bitcoin in 2010? That's very good. And who here in early 2011 was involved in Bitcoin? All right, so maybe you guys can come up to the stage very quickly, like now, here, yeah? You can come up here with me. Okay, well, if you don't want to, but at least a few of you come up here with me. What about the 2011 people that had their hands up? Some guy put his hand up there, 2011, I think, yeah, was it you? No? Okay, don't worry about it then. Okay, so guys, maybe you can give a little description yourself about what was the early energy in the Bitcoin community like? Like, how did you feel it was like?
I felt it was skeptical. It was just the latest thing that people were picking apart for whether it was going to work or not. And it was very intimate and intellectual. And then quickly sort of moved over towards ideologies, but it really wasn't ideological in the first year or two.
Yeah, I guess the main thing back then was, imagine you've got a small little project, you never know if it's going to work, you never know if anyone is going to use it, and you just want to invest a bit of time in it just to see if it will take off. So, nobody was mining. Difficulty was 1 in 2010. For 1 whole year, difficulty was 1. And if you tried to mine, it was basically your fan would go off for 3 hours, and nobody wanted to bother doing that. So for 50 Bitcoins, who cares, right? Was what the mentality was back then. And, you always had this feeling, this probably isn't going to work. That was it. It was, we never thought we'd see a room this big, let alone, the whole global Bitcoin community. It was a few people and just giving it a try. That was it, and building things.
Not sure what else to say after these two. Basically, same thing. It was just this idea of this, interesting little toy. I downloaded this bit of software. I hit the mine button and or the menu option, and it, ran for a while, and my fan started going off, so I turned it off again and deleted it. That was just. I'm pretty sure I mined 4 blocks. I'm pretty sure I got 4 blocks. I had 200 BTC, but. Then I deleted it because who cares? What is this thing? But, when I got dragged back into it, probably half a year later, something like that, then I'm like, why is this thing still around? What's so interesting? And that's when I started looking into it. That's when I started going, hey, what is this thing? And, it was just this tiny community of, interested intellectual people studying it from a technical standpoint more than anything. There wasn't as much economic discussion, the occasional post maybe, but it was technical through and through. There wasn't really any of the bigger economic or ideological discussions. I think a lot of people were ideologically aligned, but it wasn't the forefront. It wasn't what we were talking about.
Maybe also you guys can talk about the Bitcoin talk forums and what were they like as well.
Chaotic, with a lot of arguing back and forth and a lot of no, hey, you're wrong, or I don't have time to talk about this, was, okay, like a lot of online forums, there were arguments. But, also, there were people coming up with, hey, what about if we did this? What about if we did that? How about we build out a system, build out shop systems, that kind of thing. There was all of this, what could we add on to this system we have? So there were a lot of those discussions happening.
There was nothing being discussed about Bitcoin now that wasn't discussed then. They're the same arguments and the same people. And it was also in a period, pre-social media. It was in a forum period. And so the posts were like really long, and there was a lot of flame wars, and a lot of this what we call toxicity now was also present then. And it was also sort of like a, period of, it kind of like moved over into like a Gamergate sort of like a thing. It was really a social community, but again, really, really super small. And there was a lot of banhammer stuff going on, if you guys know that term, which is when the mod just goes, okay, you're kicked.
Yes, I guess like Bitcoin Talk was, I think it was actually less toxic than it became, but completely off topic. I barely even knew there was a Bitcoin bit to it, where Satoshi was posting, and I kind of missed that whole area of Bitcoin. And people were just talking about pretty random things. They were talking about what the price will be, what's it going to be used for, ideas. But mainly it was like pretty off topic. It was just anybody talked about anything, and it was just like a place where people gathered. It was very hard to find sort of signal out of the noise, but Amir managed to do it.
And maybe you can also say something about the early Austrian economists, the crypto-anarchists, the agorists, the free software people on Bitcoin Talk around 2011, like any of those kind of discussions. Did any of you guys follow what they were talking about?
Sure. So Wurgel Gelt entered into the conversation pretty quickly. So if you guys aren't familiar with Wurgel, it's a city in Austria that in the interwar period issued, basically a city scrip with demurrage that you had to spend by the end of the year, otherwise you were taxed on it. And I think that was the first part where the Austrian economics entered into the discussion. And when that happened is when all of the Ayn Rand people showed up. That's when basically the libertarian arm of Galt's Gulch and everything sort of like entered into the ideological discussion. So
yeah, I guess sort of because it was so like off topic, then I didn't follow the economics that much. But people were talking about what actually is money, what could cause something to have value, that kind of thing. But I mean, in certain sections, there were people like Satoshi, like Amir, and sort of give a shout out to sort of Marty Malmo, who just sort of got on and actually built the system. And I guess the economics was just very, very varied. It wasn't only Austrian. It was just very inquisitive and very sort of rambling on different types of economics.
So I was an anarchist long before I was a Bitcoiner. I was an anarchist long before Bitcoin existed. But I'd say I agree with Austrian economics on about 80% of what it talks about and disagree strongly on another 20%. But for that reason, I just kind of ignored those early economic discussions because they didn't seem as interesting to me as the technical discussions. I was always interested in, I'm building this interesting, cool technology which enables this future anarchistic world, whatever that anarchistic world is going to look like. I want less hierarchy, I want less control. So, I want a system that enables that, and I will work towards building that. And, do I know what it's going to look like? No, but that's kind of the point.
So also on that technical side, we had Liberty dollars, and then we had BitGold, and then we had BitTorrent, and then we had Bitcoin, and it was kind of like a sort of trajectory that was quite logical, and the conversation was really about the software that was being deployed and how it worked and how buggy it was. Try and run Bitcoin D and it doesn't do this and doesn't do that. On which card are you trying to do it on? It was like super like hacker makerspace, sort of like a community, along with the intellectualism that went along with it.
All right, thank you very much, guys. Thank you. Yeah. I'll take it. All right, so I'm going to give a narrative. So I entered into Bitcoin around late 2010. And the Bitcoin Talk forum was very small, but it was very tight-knit. And it was very intense. Like, everybody spent every day, all day on the forums talking. you know, about, oh, Bitcoin, you know, this changes everything, you know, speculating on possible futures and directions for the project. And the first time the guy on my left, Melvin, was actually the guy who introduced me to Bitcoin in 2010. And he gave me 8 links because I remember I was trying to build a project and I said, oh, PayPal, it sucks. There's like, what else can I use? There has to be something else. He said, oh, take a look at these projects. And I went through them one by one, and I think Bitcoin was like number 3 or number 4 in the list. And I like looked at the website, and the website said, Bitcoin is a form of peer-to-peer money that cannot be controlled by governments and central banks. And the website looked like crap, and I was like, this is obviously a scam project. Next. Went through the list. They're all pretty crap. And in the end, I was like, okay, let's take a deeper look. Well, I think something smashed. No worries. I said, let's take a deeper look at the Bitcoin thing. And then I started to dig a bit more into the software. And then I was like, oh, that's interesting. There is something going on there. It's not an abandoned project. There is some code there. And I read the code, and then I was like, oh, that's an interesting technique. And the more I studied it, and then suddenly everything clicked together. And that for me was a revelation. That was wow. And you know, for days I just couldn't sleep. I just was like, wow, this is incredible. And I said, that's it. I'm all in on this thing. Doesn't matter if it takes 10 years or however long. I'm 100% in to make this a reality. And funnily enough, the roadmap of that 10 years happened in 6 months, like, you know, where I saw Bitcoin would go. And I was shocked by that. And I started to get very heavily involved in Bitcoin development. You know, I was one of the first 5 developers that were listed on the website of bitcoin.org with our emails. And, you know, and at the time, you know, a lot of, it was like a mix of different, you know, groups, different backgrounds that came in. You know, there were like the free software, you know, peer-to-peer, you know, all the people that came from, you know, the Pirate Bay and BitTorrent culture and Linux and free software was one very dominant sector within Bitcoin, which is one that I came from, you know, the techies. And there were also a lot of Austrian economists that came in that were talking about gold and how Bitcoin is a form of digital gold. There were also agorists who came in. A lot of early prominent Bitcoin developers were agorists, and the crypto-anarchists. And there's a lot of overlap between agorists and crypto-anarchists. And you know, the very first presentation, I think the first presentation of Bitcoin was Gavin Andresen, when he said, oh, I was invited by the CIA to present Bitcoin. And everybody on the forum was like, dude, what the fuck? Like, dude, what the fuck? And he was like, no, it's a good thing. Anyway, the second one was the EPCA. Can you put that link to show? So that picture is me presenting in I think it was January. It says April, so it was probably in March. Yeah, March of 2011, where it was a conference in Amsterdam of all the like high-level bankers, and I gave a presentation to all these people in suits where I said, you know, Bitcoin is the future of money and your time is up. This is cypherpunk money. Anyway, when I came back, Gavin Andreessen, he DM'd me on IRC, and he said to me, Amir, I think you should not ever speak at conferences ever again. As the guy who's saying how things should be done in Bitcoin, I'm telling you, I don't think you should talk again. I was like, dude, who the fuck are you? So there was this tension that was emerging, and part of it was that, there was this guy, Gavin Andreessen, who came from a Silicon Valley tech startup culture. And there was also all these young devs who were rising up and kind of threatened the position of this god who had a different idea of how Bitcoin would be. So this is where the original kind of divergence in the two visions behind Bitcoin started to originate, where on the one side, our kind of side or group saw Bitcoin as an open source project, as a community project. And a community project is defined through public standards and development with the consent of the community and for the purpose of empowerment, versus kind of Gavin's clique, who were Bitcoin's a product. Even the way that they spoke about Bitcoin was, Bitcoin is cheaper than credit cards. That you will be able to use it instead of credit cards. So a new kind of payments technology that would eventually be integrated into banks. And so what happened? And so then, around, so I guess the first kind of struggle over the future of Bitcoin in terms of development of the code happened around BIP 11, which was the multi-sig standard. And the problem was that there was this discussion, which the main opposers of that was me and Luke Jr., where there was a change, which was a relatively small change to the Bitcoin protocol, which kind of break the kind of consistency of the scripting language, where, for example, an opcode if you have a certain output script, it get interpreted as a special case in the consensus rules. And me and Luke Jr. opposed that because we were like, this change cannot just happen in this open source project, pushed through so quickly. Whereas Gavin Andreessen was like, oh, we need to have these features ready, for our product market. And so that was a first kind of, but it ended up getting pushed through. And at the same time, what was happening, which was now around late 2011 inside of Bitcoin, was this influx of normies. And I used to get people coming to me, this is going well into 2012 now, or 2013, where people would I guess this was, it started, the process began in earnest, late 2011, but it really started to pick up as the Bitcoin price went up. And a lot of guys would come up to me, sometimes in suits, and they'd be like, you're a developer. I'm an expert in marketing. And Amir, we've got to present a good image of Bitcoin for mass adoption in order to get the big banks on board, And so all these guys started to turn up, trying to tell, they with this kind of attitude that, these crazy crypto anarchists, they've created this really interesting plaything, but if we can just pull it out of their hands, then we can turn it into something useful for the mass market. And as I said, there was this differing vision that started to emerge among developers, and you had, and there was also an age difference in some ways. There was you know, the developers that exist on Bitcoin now, who, for example, when I met SEPA in 2011, which is Peter Willer, he said to me that, I'm not really interested in Bitcoin because of the money so much. I'm more interested because of the smart contract programming functionality, the scripting language. And, you know, we were more idealistic, or like we understood that the technology had potential. Whereas this other group of guys, you know, they came more from, you know, the startup world, you know, people like Gavin Andreessen, Mike Hearn, you know, the other people that they worked with. And the way that they tried to capture development or enforce their leadership over Bitcoin was with the first attempt, the foundation, the establishment of the Bitcoin Foundation, which was completely corrupt, and it was a way for them to kind of go, you know, like, this is the official leadership on Bitcoin. It was a way of preempting this influx of idealistic developers, which kind of would threaten. Yeah, go on. Can I give a little bit counter to that, if you want?
I don't disagree with Amir, but I was the system administrator at the Bitcoin Foundation from 2012 to late 2014, and so you know, Roger Ver and Peter Vesnes and John Matonis and Patrick Merck and of course Magical Tux were the people that established the Bitcoin Foundation and brought Gavin on as the chief scientist. And there was a certain portion of idealism that they wanted to have that was modeled after the Linux Foundation. But the problem is that they never could have a unified voice. And this, from my point of view, imploded with the things that happened as Silk Road happened. There was inability to make a statement about that. With Charlie Shrem getting arrested, inability to make a statement about that. And there was never really a unified leadership. There was a desire to have independent opinions and things. And then there was the side which is Oliver Jansen and Amir, and a whole different set of idealistic people that sort of like withdrew from that challenge, but were still very, very present. The corruption, I think, was more a result of companies like Coinbase, BitPay, and Circle coming in, and this Silicon Valley side, which Amir mentions, which brought in the venture capital, and people wanted to build their brands so that we could do things like the Bitcoin conferences and things like that. So there was obviously like incestuous, brand relationship building in order to get access to money. So I don't know that I'd really call it corruption, but it was that side which leads in that direction.
all of those guys used underhanded tactics and rumor campaigns to smear open source developers who were independent of them working on Bitcoin technology.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Gavin Andreessen was a very sly guy. Peter Vesnes was just completely outright corrupt. It was just a den of snakes and liars and crooks and thieves. And there was an incestuous relationship with corrupt actors that were trying to get their hands onto Bitcoin. And a good example of that is Charlie Shrem, who was the darling of the Bitcoin Foundation, who was running BitInstant and, willingly opened his books to the New York regulators as a naive attempt to kind of go like, we want to be regulated. Look, come regulate me first. And they basically put him in prison. He got sent to jail. And all of his friends at the Bitcoin Foundation disavowed him, publicly refused to acknowledge him. And that's basically the story of capture in all of crypto. And I've heard many excuses, ranging from people going, if we are libertarians at night. We can infiltrate in the day, which is ludicrous because it's an open invitation to publicly espouse a false set of ideals that even you don't believe in, and construct a social circle of sycophants and people that are only interested in benefit. If the narrative or if the message that I'm telling is that we're building the technology to get rich, or we're building the technology because, you know, we want to support the neoliberal, you know, world system, then I'm going to attract those people as opposed to people who are like really in it for the ideals. And not only that, the Bitcoin Foundation actually acted in bad faith. Like, they actually acted to suppress independent voices or ideological developers in crypto. Could you put on the Bitcoin talk thread that I linked? Darkwallet? There's a Bitcoin talk. Yeah, maybe you can search Bitcoin talk Darkwallet on Google. You can put it up here and show people.
Can I just say, like, Bitcoin Foundation, under founding members, they've got Satoshi Nakamoto, and I thought that was quite misleading.
They also put Gavin Andresen as chief scientist, but he's not a scientist, and nobody made him chief. They made him chief. But yeah, there's a thread that I didn't actually give to them, which I was going to put. Yeah, maybe you can put. No, it's not this one. No. I'd need to Google. It's the announcement thread. But anyway, in that thread, it has our initial announcement of Darkwallet, and Gavin Andresen goes in the thread, goes, "Oh wow, amazing project, good job, guys." And the same day, I'd literally heard from a journalist that when they called the Bitcoin Foundation for a comment, they were saying, "Oh no, Amir, he's a bad actor. This project's fake. You should report on this other thing about this company getting 2 million in startup founding." You know, so they were already trying to play because the way it works in crypto is the project founders create projects. They issue tokens that represent the labor of the project that they're working on. And to get capital to be able to fund expenses, they sell that token to typically American VCs. And these American VCs, especially the TradFi American VCs, they're part of an old boys network, you know, where they hobnob with other guys who those guys get cheap liquidity. Where does that cheap liquidity come from? It's printed by the central banks. That is money that is stolen from the pockets of people in society, and and that cheap liquidity they use to purchase our labor. And in fact, the liquidity that they have is not worth that much to them because it's free. It's free money they get. But they give that to us in exchange for our labor, which is valuable. So the ones that are getting cucked in crypto projects are the programmers, the founders, the people working on projects. But there is a game that people play, a VC game, which is a scam game where they associate or they go and they interact in these social circles. And the way that you integrate into these social circles is a certain way of speaking, of dressing, of values that you espouse, which is to fit a cog into a machine. And there was the attempt by this side of Bitcoin relatively early on in its history was an attempt to integrate Bitcoin with the idea that this big money or big liquidity would flow into Bitcoin. And, you know, probably they were just motivated by a sense of getting rich, which is a form of personal corruption. But the way that they would express it publicly would be like, oh, it's good because Bitcoin could go inside of the system and change the system. And in fact, that doesn't happen. What happens is that you get corrupted by the overbearing influence or normative forces of that system. History now, as it exists in Bitcoin, the history that we read, it's been written by victors, and the memory of the early history has been erased and it's been rewritten. And that's why it's so difficult to like really for people who are coming in now to ascertain what really did happen, what really was going on. Because the story that we read is I think very different to actually what was happening inside of Bitcoin at the time. And one of the early big developments was the development of Silk Road, which was a huge embarrassment for these normative forces. And Silk Road was amazing. Like, it was truly organic adoption of crypto. It was actually demonstrating the real use of Bitcoin, where I would go to a party or some place, and people would be like saying they wouldn't know that I'm working on Bitcoin. I was just another randomer, and people would go, "Hey, have you heard of this site called Silk Road? You can buy drugs on there." And for me that was incredible, and and then we were because of how these normative forces were acting on Bitcoin, we started the crypto anarchists and the idealists and the agorists and the Austrian economists and that sector of Bitcoin who believed that Bitcoin was a liberatory technology started to become marginalized progressively within the community. So then we established the project of Darkwallet, which was an attempt to avoid this blurring of the both sides, so people to be able to lie to themselves and to other people while acting in bad faith, to draw a line and to say you're either on this side or you're on that side, to publicly draw out where do people stand and to act on principle. And so maybe you can play the original Darkwallet video for people to see. I'm just gonna...
Maybe you thought you'd see it coming, but the moment's here, and it's time to make a choice. At its end of empire, the United States imagines the power to regulate the world's first great digital currency, Bitcoin.
It's a cyber currency, so how do we get to it?
To provide a framework for its existence. A technology that questions all previous frameworks, fitted for its straitjacket. Helping the United States is a group of lobbyists and corporations calling themselves the Foundation. Their mission is a performance, to both agree with and maintain an independence from regulatory power. But you can't have it both ways. OnSystem is an international group of activist developers led by Amir Taaki. Concerned by the Foundation's centralized development and advocacy, they're developing a crypto wallet that runs on a completely independent software stack. This wallet runs on the backend Libbitcoin, the command tools SX, and the Obelisk blockchain server architecture. A thin wallet, the premier version of which will include privacy and security features, trustless mixing, and the foundation of a distributed identity protocol. Help us cover the next 4 months of full-time development. Help us make this implementation a line in the sand.
In terms of the technology. Now we are all being intercepted permanently. This is a state change.
My personal bank accounts were shut down and I was blacklisted from having a personal bank account. It doesn't matter, I was able to use Bitcoin. And now we're hearing stories of people's personal accounts being blocked.
Why are you so dangerous?
They were comfortable operating in that environment because they felt that they enjoyed complete anonymity.
Are you watching? Are you listening? Bitcoin is what they fear it is. A way to leave.
We don't know you,
To
we
forbid.
don't want you, and the sooner you're put in...
To make a choice. There's a system approaching perfection. Just in time for our disappearance. So, let there be dark.
Yeah, so that was the early Darkwallet. Maybe you can put the other thread, which our team made the first implementations of the first privacy technologies on Bitcoin. Scroll down to where Gavin Andresen is talking. So then, of CoinJoin and stuff. So that was, he's going, wow, I'm really happy to see other implementations happening. Diversity is great. And, you know, Gavin Andresen actually, on the Bitcoin Foundation, they made a list of alternative Bitcoin implementations, which there were very few at the time, but ours was deliberately excluded from that list. There's a lot of underhanded stuff going on, and you can see the journalist that was writing the story on Darkwallet, she actually sent me an email saying that they kept telling me off the record that you have no credibility, and that a much better story is some venture capitalist yesterday investing 9 million in Bitcoin. And I also go more into all of the stuff that he's doing. So there's a lot of underhanded stuff. So the execution of Gavin Andresen that happened later by the other Bitcoin developers, it was not just, I'm talking now about stuff that he did to me, but it was not just to me, it was to other developers as well. It was the group of idealistic developers versus opportunistic people. They're trying to create an official organization to cement their power. And so then what happened was the Silk Road, Russell Briggs was arrested. Now he's in jail for life. And if you can go to the petition, the Reddit thread. So then just don't scroll, just leave it there. So we made Dark Market, which was a peer-to-peer version of the Silk Road as a response. It was a prototype. You know, we were working on Darkwallet. We didn't have time to develop this software fully, but we just put it out there as a proof of concept. We called it Dark Market. And to give you a sense of the difference between, this is 2013, I think, 8 years ago. Anyway, to give you a sense of the difference between, Bitcoin, 2011 time versus Bitcoin 2013 time, there was this thread that was made, and it was like, oh, the name Dark Market is bad. Like, we need to change it, because it's going to give a bad image to Bitcoin. It's going to hurt Bitcoin's credibility. We can't have crazy, lunatic anarchists raving about Bitcoin in public. Like, we have to present ourselves as, people that, like, the bankers, and the financial people will want to invest into. So can you show the other YouTube video? This was then our response to that community of people. So make it full screen.
Drug market ultra or death market?
Go back to the beginning because they didn't hear the start.
Should I call it drug market ultra or death market revived?
Computer science, on the cutting edge. Get involved. Don't just download the latest app, help design it.
So then OpenBazaar, so then the guys contact me to say, like, oh, can we continue this project? Can you change the license, blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, do what you want with it. I don't care. And they rebranded it from Dark Market to OpenBazaar, something less edgy, something like very non-threatening. And interestingly, OpenBazaar never went anywhere. Never went into anything. I severely doubt that is because there is no demand for a decentralized crypto goods market. In fact, there's many darknet markets that exist online, but nobody's made a peer-to-peer version of it yet. But why did they fail? Well, interestingly, if you go on CoinDesk and you search OpenBazaar, they did a synopsis recently about why it failed. And one of the interesting things that I got from the article is that early on, they took a lot of money from a TradFi VC called A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz. And A16Z started saying, you need to implement censorship tech. So I had many people come and ask me, how do you know about OpenBazaar? How do I use it? But none of them were trying to sell T-shirts or, socks or eBay merchandise or whatever. So that entire vision made them unable to actually cater for the market that actually existed that wanted to use their software, actually harmed them. And so they did not develop the technology that their users actually wanted. And so they went bust. So, that's like an overview of kind of like Bitcoin's early history. But let's just talk very briefly about the scaling debate. So the scaling debate was not a purely technical debate. Like it's often framed as like it was purely about technology, or it was about whether Bitcoin would be able to become centralized, but easy to make payments with or cheap to make payments, versus if Bitcoin would maintain its decentralization and its values of autonomy at all costs. But also part of it was a way to push, and we saw this when Mike Hearn quit from the project very publicly. Mike Hearn, he was very insidious because he would make a lot of very kind of correct sounding technical changes to Bitcoin, and then they would work together to advocate for these changes. But when you looked more deeply at them, they were flawed. They were deeply flawed in some way. They'd compromised privacy. So it almost felt like he was like an agent that was like trying to undermine Bitcoin. There's some people who actually believe that's true. And actually, if we look at recently, there was a hacked email dump of Peter Todd's emails. And it actually showed that Peter Todd had been collaborating with a guy that is associated with the government. And that the guy had been making threats to his family. And actually in the email dump, actually says that, and the interesting thing is that Peter Todd was part of Darkwallet, but it actually shows in his email that he was working to undermine our access to funding. So there was a lot of things that were going on there. And after the scaling debate, we then saw a successive kind of like executing of all of Bitcoin's leaders, all of the idols and figures, for example, Rojava, all of them ended up being thrown out of Bitcoin. And that's kind of like how we kind of come to this stage today where Bitcoin kind of suffers from stagnation. In some ways, like the early days of Bitcoin were very generative in terms of the ideas that people are espousing. Now, Bitcoin's stuck in this very kind of limited economic rationalism where it doesn't give it the ability to look into the realm of narratives and ideas and other motivating factors in market forces. And it's also led to a deep conservatism where, for example, multiple Bitcoin implementations are not allowed. And so, there's a clique that ends up guarding Bitcoin development. And the consequence of that is a leadership. For example, if you look at Bitcoin Miami and you look at these guys and you're like, who are these people? Like, what are they honestly doing? Like, nothing. And, for example, they say there should only be one Bitcoin implementation because Bitcoin is is unable to be spec'd because it's written in C++, and C++ itself is not spec'd. However, if we delve a bit deeper into what they're saying, C++ is a fully spec'd language. However, there is an aspect of C++ that is not spec'd, which is called undefined behavior. And what undefined behavior says in the C++ standard is that if you ever invoke in your program undefined behavior, your program is invalid, not just where undefined behavior was invoked, but at any point in time, if undefined behavior can be invoked, your program can be compiled to absolutely anything. It's undefined. So essentially, they're saying Bitcoin cannot be spec'd because it relies on undefined behavior in C++, which is absolutely crazy to think about. Yeah, but that's not allowed according to the like dominant ideology within Bitcoin, and that's why stop other teams to create software that's better. So, for example, my friend Eric Voskill, he wrote a version of a Bitcoin implementation, a full node that syncs within 15 minutes. However, to take that prototype to production ready, he needs $2 million worth of investment. However, in Bitcoin, there's no resources for Bitcoin development. So, you know, that's a tragedy itself. And, you know, a lot of developers worked on Bitcoin, and, you know, we got a lot of other people into Bitcoin as well. And the end result is that the people who invested their time and energy into developing the Bitcoin software, as opposed to like, you know, developing businesses or investing in the Bitcoin currency, they were not able to capture back value in order to grow their activity or to expand their activity. And so that's why now all the brain power, all the best cryptographers and best developers are leaving outside of the ecosystem to where there is opportunity for them to realize their vision. In particular now, cryptography is undergoing a huge renaissance. For example, like in many dimensions, but a good example, a very strong example, is zero knowledge proofs. Zero knowledge proofs enable us to build generalized anonymous applications. And, you know, if Bitcoin continues on this current trajectory, it will not be positioned to benefit from this new technology. And, you know, like this new technology opens up an entirely new design space of not only anonymous applications, but also of being able to create fast, scalable infrastructure, you know, of being able to create full nodes that you can install on your mobile phone that sync instantly, that you can make transfers anonymously. You know, like Bitcoin, when you download it, you have to spend hours downloading the blockchain. You know, it's possible now with ZK proofs, we can actually eliminate all of that cost, basically. So what does Bitcoin need? Bitcoin, so in the early days, you know, I wrote the BIP1, which was a way to stop Gavin using Bitcoin as his own personal pet project, as a startup. I was like, I wanted to cement Bitcoin development in the hands of the community, to slow it down, to have a more consideration about the direction that it should go into, not to prevent Bitcoin development happening. Because the sad reality is that the Bitcoin protocol is constantly expanding and accumulating technical debt. The implementations are accumulating technical debt without the ability to adjust and for the community to focus on new ideas. The project will increase in bloat and it will become unmanageable. So what do we need to resolve this is not some new upgrade or, you know, some rearrangement of power, but it needs an intellectual revolution, you know, as opposed to this regressive conservatism. You know, like in some ways, like we need a good jihad or like a house cleaning. If you look at Bitcoin Miami, it's like, who are these influencers? You know, like they're like squatting power. They prevent other people who have ideas to ascend upwards because, you know, when you have opportunists sitting in a chair, the opportunist is not concerned with the ideas that people below him are espousing. Is concerned with like whether they destabilize his throne. So I'm told I have to finish, so I'll be quick. But the thing with Bitcoin though is it still has an incredible amount of power. It's like a very secure store of wealth. Recently the prices of the crypto markets crashed, and I was trying to send USDC on ETH, and it cost $170 for a transaction. Bitcoin was just 70 cents. So, but the thing is Bitcoin is not guaranteed to last. If we don't act on this, then Bitcoin will lose on its current trajectory. So what we need to do is we need to create a big shift in the mindset, so that Bitcoin can reclaim its preeminence in crypto. There is a very strong ideological foundation to Bitcoin, which is part of the consequence of these early seeds that I just talked about in its early history, and then post-scaling debate where the community forcefully separated itself from the corruption, rooted out the corruption, hunted it down, to extinction, but now ended up with, a state of affairs where it's continuing on its trajectory, but there needs to be a shift in the trajectory, a shift in the strategy, So we need to be able to come together and have this discussion about, what is the meaning of Bitcoin, how are we going to, and I think this is part of the purpose of this conference. So yeah, thank you.